Hello, and thank you for joining us for day one of Future Fest. We are so excited to welcome you all to what promises to be an incredibly inspiring series of talks featuring not one, not two, but 15 architects from A+ award-winning firms, each with their own unique stories to tell. This epic celebration of architectural innovation is a perfect way to warm up for the 11th annual A+ Awards, which launches next month. Stay tuned for more details on that a little bit later. Just a heads up, we have a few technical issues. Andre actually can't hear me, but we didn't want to delay the presentation. So he should be able to present perfectly well to you. So I'm just going to give him the heads up in the chat when we're ready to start that. Apologies for the slight technical issues, but we'll do the best that we can. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Paul Keskes. I'm the editor-in-chief at Architizer, and I'll be one of your hosts for the next 3 weeks, sharing duties with my colleague, Hannah Feniak. Today, I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to chat with Gensler's Andre Brumfield as he reveals ways in which we can build cities in the next decade and beyond. While we wait for the room to fill up, I want to encourage you all to say hi in the chat box on the right side of your screen and let us know where you're from. It's incredible to see such an amazing global audience. In the meantime, I'm going to share with you a brief video that provides a glimpse of what you can expect over the next 3 weeks.
How can architecture be a force for good in our ever-changing world? In the face of environmental upheaval, political turmoil, and unprecedented health crises, architects are being challenged to adapt. They must now react not only to the needs of clients, but also to climate change, economic turbulence, and the evolving needs of local communities. How can design address these complex issues? What should architecture look like in the next decade, and how should it function? What role can architects play in making the world a more resilient, sustainable, and equitable place for all? During Architizer's Future Fest, we'll be asking some of the world's best architects, each one an A+ award-winning designer, for their answers to these questions and more. They'll offer insights on the future of architecture at every scale, from the design of cities and urban environments, to buildings of all typologies, to the material details that bring architecture to life. Here's to the people behind the projects who are shaping better architecture for today and long into the future.
All right, so I'll just share a few quick pointers now about our live platform. If you're having any technical difficulties with the stream, you can click on the help icon in the bottom left corner of your screen, and you'll see a few options for improving your picture, the sound, and so on. It's worth noting that there will also be a recorded version of the talk, so you can catch up on anything you missed or share this with your colleagues after the event. Thirdly, for questions, you can type anything you like in the chat, but if you have a specific question you'd like to ask, we recommend you use the questions tab. Just click on the questions icon on the bottom right of your screen and then type the question. If you see a question from someone else you'd be interested in hearing, you can upvote it, and we'll aim to ask the most popular questions a little later on. Finally, feel free to use the React button whenever you see something you like. Okay, so as possibly the world's biggest architecture nerd, I couldn't be more excited about the lineup. I just wanted to give you a little summary of what you can look forward to over the next 3 weeks. So in week one, we're focusing on the future of cities, when we'll welcome to the stage Gensler, Roger Partners Architects, Zebra, Studio Toggle, and Sanjay Puri Architects. In week two, we'll zoom in and explore the future of architecture with Michael Green Architecture, Rockhind Arquitectos, MVRDV, Zaha Hadid Architects, and James Corner Field Operations. And finally, we'll delve into the future of materials, Koichi Takada Architects, Michael Su Office of Architecture, Hannah SOM, and the Future Fest finale will enjoy 10 predictions from the future of architecture. Look forward to some pretty bold and interesting predictions on September 30th. Now, it's a lot to take in, but don't worry, if you go to architizer.com and you click on the very top article, you can see all of this schedule there, and you can also see the times and the dates for each one to set yourself reminders for those you're most interested in. Now, I'm thrilled to introduce Andre Brumfield. Andre is a global leader of Gensler's cities and urban design practice. A design director in the firm's Chicago office, he's focused on and committed to revitalizing and repositioning urban environments through urban design, master planning, and architecture. Andre's broad career experience includes redevelopment in emerging urban districts, neighborhood and community revitalization, high-density urban infill, citywide master planning, corporate campuses, and industrial centers. Andre has extensive experience in mixed income housing and has crafted visionary yet realistic revitalization plans that have been implemented in economically challenged urban areas. A true urban strategist, Andre has worked with multiple public agencies, private sector clients, and non-profit organizations to develop master plans that shape the future of neighborhoods and cities. And now I'm going to bring up Andre's presentation, and I'm going to let him know that he can start. I'm not sure if you heard me earlier on, but unfortunately Andre can't hear me. However, he will be able to present. So I'm just going to bring up his slideshare right now. And hopefully we can begin.
Well, good morning. Paul, as you know, a little bit at disability or disadvantage, I should say. I can see everyone, but cannot hear. So I'll look for a thumbs up from Paul if you can hear me. Great. And I assume, Paul, I have control to advance the slides. Okay. Got it. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Again, unusual circumstances, but this is going to be fun and interesting nevertheless. Again, my name is Andre Brumfield, principal at Gensler Architects. I head up our global practice for cities and urban design, based here in Chicago, originally from Milwaukee. And I'd just like to take a little time here. I've got quite a few things to get through to talk about the future city and how do we actually think about our cities in a way that can be more balanced, more holistic, and as one of my dear friends and colleagues, Tony Griffin, would like to say, create a more just city. And it's been interesting over the last few years, and we're involved in a couple of confidential projects. When we think about our cities and our downtowns and creating innovation districts, it seems like for the past 10 years, everyone's wanted an innovation district. This is an effort that we're working on with United Properties a few years back in Minneapolis, just outside or on the edge of University of Minnesota, where they were looking to create an innovation district, which really introduced not only office, commercial, retail, 24/7 living with residential, but also an expansion of parts of their medical facilities at U of M's campus. But this image, as you can see here, gives a shot of what this innovation could look like on the edge of University of Minnesota's campus as it relates to downtown. And one of the things that I think cities are struggling with is how do we actually create balance with our new emerging districts as it relates to downtown, so our downtowns aren't hollowing out. An effort that you're going to hear me talk about a little bit for the next few minutes is revitalizing downtowns as it relates to Cleveland. We're doing quite a bit of work in Cleveland. This was an effort that we did 5 years ago with creating a new district, and they're evolving downtown. But if we think about ways that we talk about, our downtowns and where our downtowns are at, and the latest narrative is, questioning, what is the future of our downtowns and how can we actually think about our central business districts differently? Are they dying? Or as Robert Florida mentioned in an article a couple weeks ago, are they evolving? I like to think that they're evolving, and I think that's the way we have to think about not only our downtowns in our cities, but also our neighborhoods. There's a lot of mayors, city leaders who are thinking about how we actually rethink and reinvent our cities as a whole. And there's been a lot of emphasis on downtowns recently, or I should say up until the pandemic. But there hasn't been really a focus on neighborhoods and what does that mean. And a lot of times there's always this issue of the downtown or the neighborhood, the downtown or the neighborhood. One gets more attention than the other. Often it's the central business district, at least people feel. But how do we actually think about our neighborhoods? And if we think about our neighborhoods in terms of how do we actually create equity, particularly in our Black and brown neighborhoods. I've done a lot of talks over the last 2 years about, equity as it relates to the 20-minute neighborhood. We all have heard of the concept. We think about it in terms of walkability, in terms of access to parks and open space. I like to think about it in terms of creating more services and bringing more assets into our neighborhoods that are distressed. And if you think about what it means to have a 20-minute neighborhood, especially in our Black and brown communities, it comes down to assets. And in a lot of cases, our neighborhoods, particularly Black and brown neighborhoods, don't have those assets to really make a 20-minute neighborhood. So one of the things that I want to talk about for the next 35, 40 minutes or even an hour or so with you is how do we actually drive investment and think about how we actually repopulate our neighborhoods. And if we actually think about how we think about creating diversity and maintaining equity in our neighborhoods, we have to be honest and really aware of what's going on in our cities as a whole. Since 2000, the year 2000, these cities have seen a tremendous amount of Black population loss. New York, Chicago, Detroit, Philadelphia, DC. This is just a sample of the number of Black people who have actually left our major cities within the last 20 years. But in particular, in Chicago, it's even more acute. This is a map of Chicago household income in 1970, and you can see where a lot of the gray area on the south and west sides and even the north sides are where our middle income families were residing. And you can also see in the blue where the higher income families were residing. Well, you look at today, that's essentially, this chart shows, or this graphic shows, that we have lost the middle class, at least in Chicago. And while there's been a tremendous growth in terms of high income on the north side, if you look on the west side and on the south side of Chicago, predominantly where Black and brown neighborhoods are at, and families living, a number of these neighborhoods have actually transitioned, unfortunately, to low income. And we've also seen, a lot of population loss in our neighborhoods in the city. So how do we actually think about, what it takes to, or explore ways to think about how we actually repopulate our neighborhoods? We've been working quite a bit with the City of Chicago Department of Planning and Development, that's led by Maurice Cox, and also Mayor Lightfoot, who's actually put together an initiative to actually address population loss, and the idea of how the government, or how local government, could actually do a different kind of public-private development, kind of deal with developers, predominantly Black and brown, to drive investment in our neighborhoods. And we've been very fortunate to be working with the city and also working with developers to actually think about how we could actually reactivate our neighborhood cores, coordinate better with the government and the business community to actually drive inclusive growth on the south and west sides that have seen this lack of investment and also severe population loss. We're working with Polar Preservation for Affordable Housing, who's based out of Chicago, and also KMW Communities, that's led by Bill Williams, a rising star in terms of Black development world, and actually happens to be a Black developer here in Chicago, on this initiative through Invest Southwest called the AV. This is a 44-unit mixed income housing development, but it's more than just housing. It's on a vacant site on the Chicago's west side in West Hopewell Park. And we kind of put together kind of a building that isn't just an L building, but it's really three buildings kind of working as one, and how those buildings come together around this kind of common link called the stoop that really speaks to how we can actually create, kind of a backdrop for not only public art, but also gathering spaces for events such as farmers markets, which happen regularly here in West Humboldt Park. But again, it's more than just housing. We're providing space for neighborhood grocer, for health and wellness, also for National Housing Service, which will actually take up the first two floors on a prominent corner, and thinking about ways that we can actually, transform a community through community-based organization and commercial activities. All the spaces, the commercial and real estate spaces, are owned by Black and Brown entities, and actually how we actually can create, a living art wall, almost kind of a stoop and a backstage that actually gives identity, that actually gives public art something that's expressed from the community. The stoop is going to be the outdoor kind of porch, if you will, for the community, that people can come, people can gather, people can enter, and then people, again, through public art can express themselves. And the idea of neighborhood-based assets, again, beyond just the building, beyond affordable housing, how do we actually, use mixed-use development to create, those assets that are much needed for the community? But then also, this is a part of a larger scheme in terms of our plan, I should say, for the corridor, not just focused on development of the site, but a larger corridor plan that actually speaks to introducing new residential, new commercial uses, and other activities or development that's much needed for this Chicago West Side community. So the idea of actually inclusive growth, and what does this mean, and how we can actually talk about development, how we can actually talk about recreating, or I should say actually revitalizing our distressed communities by increasing population. This is just one of the examples that the mayor, Lori Lightfoot, and Maurice Cox are leading, and we're happy to be working with them. But when we think about, what this means in terms of creating more balance and more just and a more holistic city, we have to recognize where we're at today, and the housing crisis that we're in. And a lot of people think that, our top cities are actually going through this crisis. According to apartmentlist.com, the United States has reached an all-time high of $1,800 in terms of what the average cost of rent is these days. And this is overall up 12.3% just over the past year. But this is not just limited to our major cities. The next slide shows where a number of our mid-sized cities, and even our second tier and third tier cities, are seeing double-digit cost in rent. So when we think about affordable housing, this is not about subsidized housing. This is not providing public housing. This is how do we actually create true affordable housing in a number of our cities that are, not in the top 10, but in a lot of cases mid and second tier cities, and also third tier cities. This is a crisis, and how do we actually address that, not only as developers, as public leaders, but what are our role as designers? We're very fortunate, when we think about, the work that we're doing here at Gensler, and how we actually start to work with our leaders and really kind of helping to define what affordable housing means. Because again, as I said, this is not just about, low-income housing, but how do we actually, in some cases in Minneapolis, Denver, Houston, cities that are dominated by single-family zoning, how do we actually identify that missing middle? Having more townhomes, medium-sized density development, offering 6 flats, walk-up apartments. These cities don't have that missing middle. It's either or, multifamily or single family. But in other cases, if you look at Philadelphia, you look at Chicago, Baltimore, where we actually do have, those mid-size density types for housing, how do we actually preserve them? How do we actually preserve our neighborhoods so that we don't lose these housing types as neighborhoods are starting to gentrify, and also, again, forcing out middle-class families and working-class families? I mentioned, the idea of actually working in Cleveland, and not only just looking at downtown, but we've been working with the Cuyahoga Metropolitan Housing Authority to actually understand how we can actually get outside of the downtown core and start looking at areas outside of downtown as it relates to, how we can think about repurposing our cities. This is an effort master plan that we're actually just in the process of completing with the Housing Authority just outside of downtown Cleveland. Old Cedar, we're doing 2 master plans at once, where we're redeveloping 2 former public housing sites that are actually currently occupied. Old Cedar, this is one of the first public housing projects that were developed in the country in 1937. And then Althway Homes, which is just another maybe 4-minute walk away from Old Cedar. And these 2 efforts or developments are in the same neighborhood, the central neighborhood, which has the highest concentration of subsidized housing. And this is just an aerial buildup of what this area looked like in 1912. And you can see, the urban form has transitioned and transformed, not in a positive way. This is some of the highest concentration of public housing and subsidized housing in the state. And over that time span, in the last 60 years, there have been 4 public housing developments that have been developed in the central area neighborhood. And also a new public housing, privately held, I should say, affordable or low-income housing development that was actually built in 1960. So how do we actually think about and look at ways that we can actually deconcentrate poverty and subsidize housing? This is something that we do in all of our efforts to community indicators, neighborhood indicators, to really understand what the employment issues are, income, job type. We actually compare this neighborhood to the rest of the neighborhoods in the city of Cleveland and also in the metropolitan area. And as you can see, in a lot of cases, this is crime, almost 1.5 times higher crime rate than the rest of Cleveland. Family household income is very much dependent on subsidized housing and also working class families. So we take a snapshot to really understand what not only the indicators are in the neighborhood, but this actually helps us understand the built form. So these 2 developments, as I said, are in the same neighborhood. You can see where they're located. Old Cedar has about 600 units, 515 units are occupied as of 3 months ago. Althwaite, slightly larger, about 800 units in total, 625 are occupied. So our goal was to actually introduce mixed income housing and ways that we can actually find a way to balance not only residents that actually live there that are on the subsidized housing, but also introduce median income families and as well as market rate for sale and rental. Community engagement is at the cornerstone of all of the work that we do. So a lot of the development ideas that we've actually came and developed have really come from the community. We really feel that the best ideas come from the residents who actually live there, because they understand their neighborhood, they understand their site, and they give us a lot of guidance in terms of how we actually create our guiding principles. And a lot of the things that we've discussed and actually developed working with the residents was the idea of reducing the concentration of poverty. That does not mean that people need to relocate outside of the city, or elsewhere in the city, but how can we actually provide housing on site as well as provide additional housing that's still in the neighborhood while still connecting the development back to the rest of the city. A lot of these were on super blocks, streets did not go through. They were very much isolated development efforts. And how do we actually create a sense of stewardship? And what does this mean beyond just providing housing? How do we actually layer or level families into more employment opportunities, more transportation opportunities, more opportunities for education? So we think about this beyond just residential development or design. How do we actually create a real quality of life, through the power of design, working very closely with the residents and the housing authority. So I'll quickly go through a number of these efforts. This is what the site looks like today. Again, larger super block that sits on an 18-acre site, where we actually reconnected streets that are coming through and introduced a broad range of housing types. In this case, we're introduced 450 units on site, and then an additional number of units that are scattered outside the development, but still in the neighborhood for those residents who actually do want to stay in the neighborhood and who may be looking to move off site from Old Cedar. Again, a diagram showing how we reconnected the streets. Open space was a critical part of this in all of our resident meetings, where they actually wanted to have safe places for kids to play. And then also introducing a broad range of housing types, everything from townhomes and townhomes over one floor of 1-bedroom apartments, different ways that we've actually arranged it on the site, where we actually tried to frame our open spaces and our larger boulevards as we reconnected the streets. very important housing type in terms of walk-up, where we can actually not only have 2 bedrooms and 1 bedroom flats that could actually be for residents who currently live here, but also offerings for student housing as well. That's actually not too far from Cleveland State. And of course, multifamily buildings to actually get density located on the primary corners, located on the park, where we can actually have a broad range of housing types around the park, and then provide those broad ranges of eyes on the street. So this is just a rendering of looking at that main park, where you can see where we have a number of residential developments around the park. Another shot looking up the boulevard and street, as well as finding ways where we can actually create, these kind of more kind of secured moments that still have a number of housing units on the open space, and then also ways that could connect to a larger open space system. I'll quickly go through Althwaite, which is a little bit larger and a little bit more challenging as well because of its location. We're introducing 732 units of mixed income housing here. Again, you can see how we actually reconnected the street grid and brought new streets in, and actually connecting to the adjacent to the rest of the neighborhood. Again, we have 4 different types of open spaces. This is a much larger development, about 40 acres, where it was very important that the residents wanted to have a series of family of parks actually circulating around a larger recreation area that actually starts to have each quad, if you will, within the new development to have its own space, open space working together. So again, just showing the unit distribution. We're using townhomes, stack flats, walk-up apartments, what we'd like to call a 2-over-1, which is a townhome over a granny flat, where we can actually have elderly housing, not only in the multifamilies, but we can also offer those in the 2-over-1s. Again, our walk-up buildings, apartments that actually offer that kind of mid-level density, and then our multifamily buildings. And again, just a few renderings of what this actually looks like in the larger neighborhood. But as we talk about affordable housing, and I've been talking a lot about mixed income housing, we also like to find ways where we can actually, through the power of design, have an impact on our built environment, and how we can actually work with cities who are looking to decommission some of their most distressed neighborhoods, and I should say distressed industrial areas, and turn them into a new kind of life and new kind of purpose that will give new identity for the city. So as I mentioned, we've been working in Cleveland, and we're still working in Cleveland with the Housing Authority, but we've also been working in a community called Avon Lake, which is just 17 miles west of the city of Cleveland, working with Charles Solutions and Avis and Young to repurpose a coal factory, or I should say a coal plant, which is actually being shuttered. Was just closed within the last year. And this is really speaking to our ESG kind of goals as it relates to how we actually create, a new urban form for a number of different cities. This with the decommissioning of this site, we're not only contributing to how we actually clean our air, where we're actually taking a number of more than 3 million tons of mercury and nitrous oxide out of the atmosphere. Then also finding ways where we can actually preserve Lake Erie, with out pumping polluted water back into the lakefront system. But also, as we think about decommissioning this plant, there's an environmental story related to how we actually start to clean up some of our creekways that are actually leading up to the plant itself. So this is the plant today, sitting on 55 acres, currently being shuttered. The first goal is to remediate this. Charles Solutions is actually going to be salvaging all of the steel, over 140 million tons of steel. They're also salvaging more than 4 million tons of copper as well. So this is not just about redevelopment. This is about working with the right entities who are looking to recycle and remediate the site the right way. So this is a view looking at the site today. One of the first things that we wanted to do is see what we could preserve. It's hard to recreate place when you're actually wiping that slate clean. So we wanted to find ways to actually preserve the identity of the coal fire plant. We've actually are looking to repurpose the historic turbine hall, and also keep the smokestacks as well. Again, we see value in some of the place that's there, but then finding ways to actually create a new urban form. with that, we wanted to expose the turbine hall in terms of adaptive reuse and give it a new facelift that actually is facing the lake and open this up historically to the lake. And one of the things I should mention with Avon Lake, this entire city has been cut off from the lakefront for the past 110 years. You either have industry or you have private homes that are actually hugging the coastline. So this is not only about revitalizing, the city itself, but actually reconnecting the city back to the lakefront for the first time in more than 100 years. And with that, we thought that it would be important to create, a road that actually for the first time takes you past and gives you a visual look out to the lakefront. But then also with that, which we really think is the driver of this effort, a 19-acre park that is actually currently in negotiation with the city and also the county to actually create a new waterfront park for the first time. Again, that actually gives the residents, a strong public realm along the lakefront. And with that, that will be the driver to set up 4 new development that would actually include more than 1,500 or 1,300 units of housing, another 250,000 square feet of office located in the turbine hall, and then again, the 19 acres of open space. And we talked about the idea of kind of how we think about our open space. These are just some sections in terms of how we're thinking about access of these creeks, and that we're looking to remediate the creeks as well as provide new open space system. And then the 4 neighborhoods that really are the driver for what's happening on the site. So these are just some images showing what the site looks like. We wanted to, again, to create a new vision for the city of Avon Lake. The idea of creating an accessible public lakefront, again, something where we're talking about reclaiming the lake and also providing a new open space system, extending the city of Avon Lake to the waterfront for the first time in more than 100 years, and then adaptive reuse where we can, again, that creative, that sense of place of the old historic turbine hall and what that means moving into the future of creating a new 21st century office space for the creatives, for makerspace, and for other uses that really could be public and private. And last but not least, and Paul, I assume I'm doing okay on time. This is the last example I have. Yes, no, thumbs up, thumbs down. I'll keep going. But getting back to Chicago, we had the pleasure again of working with the city on the Inglewood Trail, and this is an elevated. Hello, can you still hear me? You can still hear me. Okay, good. Something's happening on my end. Thank you. We had the pleasure of working with the city and also the Inglewood neighborhood, which is arguably the most distressed neighborhood in the city of Chicago. This is about how do we actually create take an asset that's been distressed and transform it into something that actually creates a new identity for a distressed neighborhood on Chicago's South Side. This is actually, believe it or not in the woods. You're not in a suburban area. You're not in the country. This is an elevated trail, an abandoned rail line that's running through one of Chicago's toughest neighborhoods. And what the city is looking to do is working with a local not-for-profit who actually is creating a whole ecosystem around urban agriculture. And the driver for the urban agriculture is to create this new nature trail and revitalize this part of the city. This is an aerial photo of it. It's running about 1.75 miles through the neighborhood of Inglewood. And with that, we, in addition to the rail line being abandoned, one of the issues that we're actually addressing is the vast amount of vacant land. So all the blue that you see here is not only vacant land, that's land that's owned by the city of Chicago. So how do we actually think about ways that we can actually take this asset and use urban agriculture as a driver for creating a new economy, but also start to problem solve, as I said earlier, about trying to repopulate some of our neighborhoods by creating a new asset. So this is literally, we're in the middle of this effort. We had a huge community meeting last week where we actually wanted to focus around 5 major nodes where we can actually encourage not only new types of development, but also ways that we can actually start to really stimulate the urban agricultural system here. Yeah, I think this is still timing. Here we go. So as I mentioned earlier, one of the things that we do in all of our efforts is create a pretty extensive and intense engagement and outreach effort with the community to understand what they want to see here. So how do we actually think about, landscape, urban agriculture, open space forums in a much different way, and talk about urban design and planning, not only through new development, but creating this new ecosystem here of how we actually can create, just turn this distressed asset and couple it with community orchards, also urban agriculture, to create a new identity. These are some initial efforts that we have actually started to develop and we share with the community for the first time. This is actually one of the parks that's located in Inglewood. And our thought was, how can we actually still preserve the trees, but then kind of use ways to actually open up the trail to the public. And we have an effort, or I should say, a structure that we're calling the butterfly, that actually kind of nestles in the natural environment, where we can actually expose the trail and give a new identity built on a very strong identity that already is there in Inglewood. And find ways where we can actually give kind of these new forms here that actually speaks to how you actually move on a trail, how you see the trail from the neighborhood, and also create again kind of a new look for the neighborhood. This is an abandoned school that we actually are identifying that could actually be a new learning center and a new growing center for indoor farming, greenhouse, learning classrooms, places where we can actually start to have new water filtration, and then open the building up, to allow for new outdoor farming and be, again, that kind of anchor to the neighborhood. And how we think about adaptive reuse. Again, we're not driving new development here, but we're trying to find ways where we can actually introduce new ways to actually adaptively reuse some of the structures that are currently there in the city. So as I mentioned, the idea of how we actually, start to think about this trail and how do we actually start to revitalize our neighborhoods and start to drive more population back. There's always been a concern about gentrification here. Unlike 606, for those of you who are familiar with that in Chicago, unfortunately, Inglewood has a long way to go before it can actually be considered gentrifying. But we want to put those tools in place. So if we're looking 10 years down the line, that the community can actually benefit from the change and not be displaced because of it. So last but not least, before I turn it over to some questions that you and Paul and others may have, this is not an either or when we talk about our downtowns or our neighborhoods. It has to be an and. I think if we've learned anything over the last 2 years during the pandemic, as we start to think about, our neighborhoods that have now in a way kind of being rediscovered because a number of us have been forced to work from home, our downtowns, which at best may be operating 50 to 60% capacity where they were pre-pandemic level. We know that hybrid work is here to stay in some way, shape, or form. And if we think about investment, we know that our downtowns are our economic drivers for a number of our cities, but we also know that our neighborhoods are really the lifeblood of really how a city actually functions. So how can we actually create that balance and try to problem solve for both, as opposed to being sucked in a pre-pandemic trap of either or? These have to work together. If we want to create a future for our city, we have to create balance. We have to have it more holistic. And again, as my dear friend and colleague Tony Griffin always likes to say, we have to have a more just city. So with that, that concludes at least my chat. I will welcome questions at least through the chat. And again, thank you so much for taking the time out to join, but also work through my technical issues that I'm having on my end.
Well, I know that Andre can't hear me, but I'm going to say thank you, Andre, anyway, because that was absolutely fascinating presentation. And if you'll all bear with me, if you missed this earlier, Andre actually can't hear me speaking right now, but he did an incredible job of presenting, and in spite of this. But I'm just going to give him some questions in the chat, and then he'll have a moment to read them, and then I'll give him a thumbs up, and he'll be able to answer. So the first question I'm going to ask Andre is, let me just check who this was from. From Greg Webster. This is a very popular question. How do you control rising costs of market demand for these wonderful places? The more these places look appealing, the more the prices are going to rise again. And how could that be controlled to maintain and keep affordability within reach? So I'm just going to send that now to Andre and give him a moment to read and digest. And then when he's ready, he can answer us. Thanks for bearing with us, everybody.
Okay, great. Appreciate the question. I think one of the challenges here is, how do existing residents, benefit from change? And coupled with the work that we actually do are two things. Not only are there market studies that are done to understand where the projections where we may be going with some of these projection trends, but also coupled with that, one of the things that we actually like working with public agencies is our ability to actually influence policy and how we can actually, find ways, whether it's, working with existing homeowners who a lot of cases, their home is their only asset that they have, where they can actually, make the improvements to their home, and also find ways that they can actually stay there through, whether it's controls in terms of their taxes. Once the area median income starts to go up, what families and homeowners who have been longtime homeowners may be eligible for some policy or some programs that actually freezes their taxes if they've been there for the past 25 or 30 years. One of the other things that some of the cities we know we're looking at or working with is finding ways to work with developers to assure that they actually are bringing in the balance of affordable housing that's needed. Again, something that's not focused on subsidized housing, but affordability across the board in terms of whether it's those without college degrees, those who are actually working in certain industries in the public sector, whether it's police, fire, healthcare. There's a number of different things that a number of cities are looking at in terms of how to actually make sure that the residents who actually are there today remain in place.
That's wonderful. It's a complex issue, clearly, but I think more than anything, Gensler has a really firm grasp on these kind of complex issues. So I'm going to grab another question here from Peter. Peter asks, can architecture do anything to help address the problem of crime in the inner city, which is obviously driving population flight at times? I'm just going to post this to Andre now. Give him a second to think about it.
Very interesting question. It's interesting. The plan for transformation, for those of you who may or may not be familiar with it, was something that was started here in Chicago around 2000, where former Mayor Daley worked with the Housing Authority and HUD to take down all the high-rise public housing projects. Chicago had the largest concentration of high-rise public housing outside of New York in the country. Some of the most distressed public housing in the nation. And a number of those developments have come down, and those have been replaced by mixed-income housing. And while a number of those sites are still developing even after 20 years, which is a whole nother issue, the design and the architecture has not been as strong as it probably should have been. And one of the things that Maurice Cox, who's the Commissioner of Planning and Development here in Chicago, is that he has actually come in through Mayor Lori Lightfoot a couple years ago and has elevated the role of design and has really focused on creating a culture of design excellence in a city that already has that. But finding ways to actually raise the bar here in terms of bringing quality design to our Black and brown neighborhoods. And his thought and his theory, which I support, which many of us always have supported before he got here, is that our distressed neighborhoods, our distressed cities, they don't want development. They don't deserve development, or don't just deserve new ways of trying to find ways to revitalize their physical environment. Our neighborhoods deserve quality design as well. And I do believe that the quality of design actually does impact the way that one views his or her neighborhood, how they actually take care of it, how they actually take ownership in it. And the power of design, I think, is very important when we talk about, how we actually could, stabilize our neighborhoods. Now, will good design bring back population? Will it bring back our Black and brown population, our distressed neighborhoods? I can't say for sure, but I think good design does give good identity to our neighborhoods and make it that much more attractive for those residents who may consider some of our neighborhoods of choice, and having more options in terms of where they want to live based on how their built environment looks. So I'm a firm believer that design matters, and our neighborhoods, particularly our distressed neighborhoods, deserve quality design.
It's a fantastic answer. I think, it's very interesting to think about design's value beyond aesthetics, and I think that's what a lot of A+ award winners are all about. The stories behind those projects are about improving places and living environments for people, far beyond just good looks. Although it doesn't hurt if those projects are beautiful as well. I'm just going to post one more for Andre. Maybe we'll have time for one more after that. It is another complex question, but let's see. Just checking who this one was from. So this is from Joshua. Are these projects driven by the architects at Gensler, who in turn appoint or get in developers to achieve the plans, or are they developer-driven projects? How does the relationship between architects and developers work here on such projects? So I'm just going to send that over now. Give me a second to read it. It's a great question for projects of this scale.
We have three different type of clients, I'd like to say, that we work when we're doing work in the community, and actually we're working when we do work across the city. One client is our developer client, which may be a minority developer, maybe a large developer. That's one type of client. Our second client that we have tends to be public agencies, whether it's the Department of Planning, Department of Economics, Housing Authority. All three of those kind of work in that kind of second bucket. And our third client, I like to say, is our spiritual client, which is the community. And our community client, although we are not don't have a contract with them, they can get us fired as well. So I bring this up to say this, is that all of our efforts tend to evolve, if not two, if not three of those groups. Sometimes we're contracted to the developer, other times we're contracted to the city agency, but they often seek us out, whether it's through a competitive bid or they reach out to us to bring us on to an effort, that may be developer driven or may be driven by an initiative by the city. The relationship between the architect and developer is a fluid one. All of our clients, we don't have a bad client. We do not have a bad client. It's very much fluid in terms of how we actually work through what the issues are, how do we actually problem solve, and then we bring in that third client, which is the community, to not only keep them aware, but to actually help us, create a better design for their community, because they know the community better than we do. So these projects, all of the efforts that I've shared with you and others that I've not shared with you, involve all three of those client components. So they reach out to us either through a competitive bid or reach out to us directly to bring us on to a particular effort. I'm hoping I'm answering the question as I'm trying to dissect or digest this as I read it off the screen. So very good.
You're doing a fantastic job, Andre. I think we've really done a pretty good job of this, considering we can't both hear each other. So yeah, I just got disconnected for a minute there, but I'm back now. I'm going to ask one more question, but before I do, just to let everybody know, I've just published a poll. So if you go to the polls tab in the bottom right corner of your screen. If you're interested in potentially participating in an event like this as an A+ award submitter, we'd love to hear from you. You can answer the poll that we've put up. You can request a submission guide, or you can request to register for the upcoming A+ Awards, which launches in October. So I'm just going to leave that there whilst I pick one more question for Andre to answer. Let's see. Another popular question here. This one is from Anais. A lot of architecture being built today is very streamlined and can be quite clinical. Do you see future products addressing the needs of the population whilst also bringing back architectural character and charm? I'm going to post that one.
Saved the most challenging question for last. I do see a future in, design being more specific to the needs of the population. And again, as I said, design does matter. I think we all can agree on that. One of the things I think that is going to be a challenge for our industry is how do we, create quality design while, really responding to, the sustainability goals that we have to achieve to create, and address climate. And I think one of the issues that I think many of us can agree upon is that while we do believe in sustainability through design, architecture, urban design, urban planning, particularly as we're working with the private sector, how can we actually convince our developers that that cost is worth it? How do we actually, make our clients more responsible to, dealing with the sustainability issues and challenges that we have with climate change? I think that that's clearly where the future is going. I'm wondering, if it's going to be possible here based on a lot of the challenges that we have to deal with in terms of cost, how much time it actually takes to get some of these projects built. And then what does that mean in terms of actually having quality design, that is going to, still be responsive to the context, but also kind of takes us deeper into the 21st century. I think it's a challenge for all of us. And I think the idea of how we actually streamline this deeper into our profession, we're not as far as I think any of us would like to be, but I think it's important that we actually create that path to get there, because we know that the future is changing on us almost every day, and we have to be more responsive in terms of what that means to our cities, and more importantly, what that means to the end user, which is our community and the people that we serve.
Absolutely amazing presentation, Andre, and responses to questions that you couldn't even hear me for. Really, really thrilled with how this went, despite our technical challenges. As I mentioned, there's a poll up right now. If you are interested in finding out more about the upcoming A+ Awards, please do let us know using that poll, and we'll send you some information later on. And we've also got our next talk coming up tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern. That's going to be with Rob Rogers on how to design more livable cities. So I think it will be a great continuation of this discussion. And I hope to see you all there. Thank you again, Andre. And yeah, absolutely thrilled. Thank you, everybody, for attending, and look forward to seeing you in the next talk.
Thank you. Thank you.